All right. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Wealth Building for Dummies podcast. My name is Kyle Demian. I'm joined here, as always, with Renji Matthew. And today we're not going to be talking about the American dream, but rather the American retirement crisis. We've got a video here that we're going to play from CBS News where it talks about a specific couple living in Florida and how their retirement is not as they dreamed and not as they expected.
Tonight, we begin exploring an anxiety-producing question. Do I have enough saved for retirement? Nearly 40% of households face a lower standard of living in retirement. And a couple in Florida who had retired but are now back on the job.
This is certainly not part of Larry Gessick's retirement plan. The 77-year-old electrician by trade leaves at 5:30 a.m. and heads for his part-time job unloading trailers at a local supermarket in St. Petersburg, Florida, for $14.75 an hour. His wife, Joyce, 66, prepares for her workday, making $14 an hour as a full-time legal administrator.
It's not really a retirement.
What is it?
It's working every day.
The Gessicks came out of retirement not because they wanted to, but because they had to, and are among the 11 million Americans, 1 in 5 over 65, who are still working.
It's hard, 77, still busting my butt.
So I call it the work, retire, repeat syndrome.
Labor economist Teresa Ghilarducci says work is the new retirement.
More than half of the people who are retired right now do not have enough money to be retired.
Who's to blame for all of this?
I blame policymakers who experimented with our retirement system 40 years ago, and they are not saying the experiment failed.
That experiment is what we know today as the 401k, named after part of a 1978 law that offered companies an alternative to the traditional pension plan.
The thought was that Americans just need a little bit of financial literacy and they can just save on their own.
But in fact, many of today's older workers were never taught enough about saving and investing for retirement.
I grew up on a farm. Nobody there instructed any of us to put money aside and make your own way later on down the road.
Whether you're past 65 like the Gessicks or almost their ages, there are a few rules of the road to keep in mind. Basically, everyone needs a plan. First, figure out when it's best to claim Social Security. Next, fund an emergency reserve. Still working? Set aside 6 to 12 months worth of living expenses. Already retired? Make it 1 to 2 years worth. And keep that reserve in a safe, easily accessible interest-bearing account.
Like many working Americans, the Gessicks were more doers than savers. They drained their 401ks.
I think to us it felt more like a savings account than to focus on, I need to have this piled up to actually live on.
They have a mortgage, a car loan, and are paying down about $12,000 in other debt. But even with Social Security, some old pension funds, and their paychecks, money is tight.
All these expenses and the debt paydown leaves you with very little money every month, right?
Yes,
How much is that?
$50.
Had the Gessicks waited to age 70 to claim Social Security, they would be collecting more.
Can you look at a time where you feel like you can breathe a little more easily, or are you still under stress?
Yeah, it's stressful now, but I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Getting there won't be easy. For Eye in America, Jill Schlesinger in St. Petersburg, Florida.
All right. So we just finished that video. Kind of a lot to unpack here. Renji, a couple of the stats that stood out to me. Let's at least talk about the statistics and what they're talking about now. But 1 in 5 people over the age of 65 are still working. And more than half of the people that are retired claim that they do not have enough to be retired, or they're not living the retirement maybe that they wanted to. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that you kind of want to expand on and talk about?
I think that stat is so true because you and I have talked about this many times where we've had several conversations with people that come to us to look at what their retirement income would look like, or people that are already retired that are having to go back to work, right? They're either having to go back to work because they ran out of retirement income that they thought they would be able to live off of forever, or they're having to work longer because what they were saving up is not enough to retire on, right? So, and that's what we're seeing the issues with, and a lot of that has to do with the same traditional financial advice that's been given for over 40 years now. It just hasn't been working out like they thought it would, right? And they mentioned that in the video, like it just didn't come out like they planned it to be. But they're still giving that same advice, which is what I think we should talk about, what are the different ways you could do things differently? Like they mentioned in the video, there's things you should do outside of trusting the government with everything, right? So, let's go into that and talk about some of that.
Yeah. So they say that policymakers are to blame because 40, 50 years ago, they experimented with the retirement system and they're not admitting that it failed. And she's talking about the 401k. Some people have a 401k, others don't, but the 401k was introduced as a alternate to the pension. And long story short, pensions costed our employers a lot of money. And they still do for the companies that offer it. But the responsibility was on the employer to fund their employees' retirements. Employers got smart and said, hey, what's some ways that we can cut back and save money? And they said, hey, let's just create this new account, shift that responsibility of retirement from us as the employers to the employees, and they can fund their retirement. They can put as little in as they want, or they can put as much in as they want. And I think that might be some of the problem that we can talk about here in a moment is like the responsibility is all on the individual. But is there anything else you want to add into like how the pension transitioned to the 401k?
Yeah, so back when 401ks and even the IRAs were started, it was between the 70s and 90s, right? So the whole idea behind that was back then, the taxes were so high. Right. It was right after the war. Taxes were really high to replenish the economy. So it made sense to come out with the 401k, which are tax deferred plans. So the whole idea was, hey, our taxes are up in the 90 percentile. I don't want to pay 90% of my income to taxes. So they came out with the 401ks and IRAs to defer taxes. So the idea was put our money into these, then defer it down into the future when taxes are lower. Now, when we access the money, we're paying a lot less in taxes. So it made sense for that time. So, but the problem is I don't think they thought about, hey, if we keep deferring taxes when taxes are lower, or, that might not be the best plan, right? But they never talked about it. Even the creator of the 401k came out and said, yeah, this has gone crazy. This is not what it was meant to be for, because the whole idea was to put it into that account when taxes are so high so that you're paying less later down the future. Because back then, like you said, everyone had pension plans. Those were amazing because you got guaranteed income for life. You didn't have to worry about the market volatility so much. You didn't have to worry about putting aside money for anything else, because you had a pension plan that paid for you for life. But what happened is a lot of these employers and corporations realized, hey, these 401ks actually benefit us more than it benefits the employees. Because think about it, pension plans, they had to pay your income for life even when you're not working for them. With the 401ks, they don't have to do that. They get a tax break for offering it to you, and you don't get to choose. They give you the assumption of, okay, hey, you get to choose what you want to invest in, but they only give you a certain amount of choices, right? That they want you to invest in, and you get to pick out of that. And you have market volatility, so you don't know what the market's going to do. You're going up and down, so there's no guarantee on how much your income's going to be at retirement either, right? And if the market loses all your money, there's no guaranteed income for life either. So for the employer, it was amazing because, hey, now we have a plan that we can put into play that we don't have to worry about paying them for life, right? So it just made more sense for people. But what most people don't realize is hey, there's pension plans out there still that you can set up on your own that doesn't have to depend on your employer. That doesn't have to, that gives you market protection even when the market's going up and down. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to do on our own instead of giving the government all the control, right? 401ks, again, there are a place for them. Not saying not to use them. There is a place for them. There's a place for any type of thing, but it's not a one size fits all. No matter what's out there, no matter what type of strategy you use, it's not one size fits all. Everyone's goals might be different, right? So I think that's what people need to realize is, hey, what is my goal? And you got to backtrack and see, how do you get to that? How do you, like, let's say your goal is, I need to make this much for per month in retirement. Okay, now what are the steps to set yourself up for that? And what are the different types of accounts that are out there to set yourself up for that? Because most employers will only offer you a few options, and most of the time, those options probably help them more than it helps you. What
Absolutely.
are your thoughts on that?
Everything you said is spot on, and it's kind of interesting because when I got into my first job that offered a 401k, they kind of just threw it at me and was like, "Hey, here's the papers for the 401k if you want to sign up, and here you go." And like, nobody helped me determine how much to save, determine which funds to choose, and that company had a lot of funds to choose from. The average person has no idea what they're looking at, what all these funds names mean, what these mutual funds are for, what these target retirement funds are for. And I think that's where like the little bit of education needs to come in. And they mentioned that in the video, like they were assuming that like there would be some more financial education. This was 40 years ago. And up until like the last few years, most states in the United States still don't even teach a financial course in high school. Colleges don't really teach it unless you're going down maybe the business route, or definitely, obviously, going down the finance route. That's the only time you really ever learn about money. But just like throughout the rest of our lives, where are we going to learn about money? Our parents don't know. Our grandparents don't really know how money works. The school system isn't teaching us. It's up to ourselves to go out and educate ourselves. But there's not many. I guess for us, we know there's a lot of resources out there because we're in the world and we're always looking and watching YouTube and stuff. But like, the information is out there. You just have to look for it and to explore and to get curious and learn why things happen the way that they do when it comes to money, the market, taxes, retirement, and so on. So man, you touched on a lot of good points. A couple of things that I want to get to, and one of them is like, okay, so somebody just watched this and they don't have a pension. Their job doesn't offer it, right? And actually, let's take one step back. So when you get to retirement, the only thing that matters in retirement is your income, the income that you can take from your assets. It doesn't matter how much I guess it does. It matters how much you've built up, but then it's about converting that lump sum, your nest egg that you've built up, converting that into income. And so every person, when they go to retire, at least typically has two options for retirement income. Some people are lucky enough to have three. The first option is Social Security. The second option, if you're lucky enough, is having a pension. And then the third one is your personal assets, your lifetime savings, and how can you convert that into income. So the first things that people need to do, and the unique thing about this is it actually doesn't matter what your age is. But like, you need to run a retirement income analysis. If you're 60 and thinking about retiring within the next 5 to 10 years, you definitely need to run it just to figure out where you're at. If you're in your 30s, you need to run it to figure out where you're going to be in potentially 30 or so years. But the income analysis that you need to run is estimating, what is your Social Security going to look like? If you're retiring in 30 plus years, is Social Security even going to be there? We don't know. I think it'll be there to some extent. It just might not be what our parents and grandparents would have earned. The second thing is, if you're going to have a pension, estimate what your pension is going to look like if you work for that company for 20 or 30 years. And the last one, the third one, is estimate with how you're saving and investing your money now, what should that grow to become in the approximate year that you're trying to retire. Now, Renji and I have calculators that we take our clients through this just to figure out at least what track they're going down for right now. Because here's the thing, once you know your retirement income projection number, then you learn your financial freedom number. You learn what it's going to take to help you reach your goals and allow you to live the retirement that you want. And it's all part of planning. You know, we talk about it often on here, but how important it is to know where you're on track to go. And here's the thing, if you catch it early enough and you realize, oh, wow, that's a lot less income than I wanted to have in retirement. If you catch it early enough, you've got time to build it back up and to get to the retirement that you want to have. Like the couple in the video we just watched, if you catch it too late or you don't realize it until retirement, you have to go back to work. You have to go back to work. And the gentleman is 77, and I think they said he's unloading trucks and he's helping like in the back in the warehouse. Like, I don't know how much longer a 77-year-old can do that, but kudos to him. He must be in pretty good shape. But like, obviously that's not something that he wants to do while he's retired. So with that, that's like the first thing anybody and everybody should do is just run a retirement income analysis, learn how retirement actually works, and start there. Another question I think a lot of people may be asking is like, you know, how much should I save or how much should I invest on a monthly or annual basis? And Renji, do you want to take that question? If somebody were to ask you, how much should I be saving or investing, you know, out of my paychecks, it's part of my budget, what would you recommend? What would you tell them?
I mean, it really depends on your income and how much time, like Kyle mentioned, how much time you have before retirement. But traditionally, people talk about putting anywhere between 10 to 20% of your income into some type of different assets, right? And that could be 401ks. That could be plans you start on your own outside of work. There's also again, so that depends on how much that is income wise for you and how long you waited to start something. Because the older you are, the more money you would have to put into that, because now you're getting closer and closer to retirement. And for all the like, we did an episode on this before, so go check that episode out. We talked about if you're at 30, if you're at 50, if you're at 60, how much you're going to have to put in to get a certain amount at retirement, right? So the older you are to set those up, the more you have to put into retirement. So this is why it's always better the earlier you start, because the younger you are, the longer time you have. And that's another thing too. When you're young, being in the market is not a bad thing because you have more time to take the risks. But as you get older, especially when you're in your 50s and starting to get closer and closer to that retirement age, you want to have more of your money protected. Because if imagine, so I had a client from, I think this was 2 years ago. He was in his late 30s, so he wasn't too worried, but he lost $400,000 in his 401k. Thankfully, he works a really good job. He has more than 20 years before retirement, and he wasn't too worried that money will come back up. But imagine if he was 64, about to retire, and he lost $400,000 from his 401k. That would be devastating, especially if you plan to live off of that, right? So once you get closer and closer to retirement, you need to reallocate your risk tolerance. Like, right, you have to have less money in risky situations. That way you have more money to depend on, more money to live off of. And something we talk a lot about is passive income. If you have the chance to get into passive income, think, you got to do your own research, see what your risk tolerance is, because again, that's also taking risk, right? So you just have to figure out what there is to do out there. And this is where it falls on you. You have to do a lot of research or find mentors that are doing what you're trying to do and learn from their mistakes, learn from what they're doing. Because when you try to get into something on your own, you're going to have failures. But if you learn from other people's mistakes, even if you had to pay a mentor money to learn from their mistakes, that just takes that. It's like going to college. That's your education cost, right? Instead of going and doing it on your own and taking those mistakes and losing that money and you didn't get anything for it, right? So there's different things you can't do. And I think a lot of it falls on you on how much you're wanting to put aside for retirement and how late you waited to do that too.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of as you were talking is like, financial advisors and people that help with, retirement planning, they're not necessarily like miracle workers, because there's only so much that they can do. It still always comes back to the individual and how much that they can save. And simply enough, the more that you can save now, the more that you'll have later, given time, compound interest, and just consistent investing in saving and growing your money. So I always say, like, how much should you save? How much should you invest? As much as you can. Your target should be, 10 to 20%. And a lot of times that's going to dictate when you can retire too. I know a lot of people that think retirement is an age. Oh, I'm going to retire when I'm 65. But like for the couple in the video, that's what they planned for. They were planned for retiring at whatever it was, 60 or 65. And that didn't work. And now they're having to go back to work. Retirement isn't an age anymore. And remember, retirement may have been an age when you had Social Security and a guaranteed pension from your employer. Some of those companies would kick out their workers at 60 or 62 and say, hey, here's your pension. We've got to bring in, the younger people now, depending on what the job was. But, retirement isn't an age anymore. It's a number. And that number is taking your assets and converting it into income. And one of the things people don't realize is, like, how do you actually do that? So it's called the safe withdrawal rate, or the 4% rule, which means that you can safely withdraw 4% of your assets each and every single year in retirement. And that should keep you from running out of money in retirement. So if we do the quick math, just to kind of figure out, where you should be when you want to go and retire, depending on what some of your goals are. If you have $1 million saved up, doesn't matter what type of account it is, but $1 million saved up and invested into some type of retirement account, 4% of that per year would be $40,000 a year, $40,000 annually. Now, for some, that may be enough. For others, that may not be anywhere close. This is where obviously everybody has different retirement goals. And to a lot of people, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but you simply can't take out 10% per year, because simply enough, 10% per year, you're going to run out of money in 10 years. 4% is the safe withdrawal rate, which allows you to statistically should be able to make your money last as long as you do. And with that, Renji, one of the things you talked about was like there's like personal pension accounts that people can set up. It may not make sense for people in their 20s or 30s, but people that are in their 40s, 50s, and of course 60s and 70s that are getting close to or either at or near retirement, they should look into one of these accounts, because they had 3 benefits that you touched on. Guaranteed income, there's no market risk, no volatility, and then the third one is that gives you peace of mind with your retirement savings, right? If you have $400,000 saved up, you don't have to worry about losing any more money. And then you get this guaranteed income for life, which is exactly what a pension does. A pension is guaranteed income for the rest of your life that you can't outlive. You can set up these retirement accounts for yourself. Do you want to talk a little bit more about those for us, Renji?
Yeah, so those are not with your work, it's outside of work. Again, you have to set these up on your own, but we can help with those. If that's something you guys want to look at, just reach out to us. But these plans, there are ones with fees, there are ones without fees. Of course, if there's a fee, there's some type of value they provide. And that's individualistic, so it would be something that we could talk about if you guys reach out to us or whatever. But again, all of them depends on your specific goals. What are you trying to do? How much access are you trying to get? How much income are you trying to access every year for retirement, right? So there's different things that go into that. But one thing to keep in mind, 4% rate is for being in the actual market 401ks, IRAs. If you have something, imagine if you had an IRA with the floor, where when the market goes up, you get the growth, but when the market goes down, your money's protected. If you had old 401ks or IRAs, you can roll them into these, or if you're in retirement, you can roll part of again, we don't say roll everything into it, because again, like we said before, none of these plans are one size fits all, right? Everyone's plans are different, everyone's goals are different. So research to see if this even makes sense for you. And if it does, how much do you want to put it into one of these accounts? Because something we talk about a lot is the break-even burden. If you had 100,000 and the market goes down 50%, you're at 50,000. Now, when the market goes back up 50%, a lot of people think they're going to be right back at 100, but 50% of 50,000 is only 25,000. So they're only going to be at 75,000. So the market will have to go up 100% if it goes down 50 to get back to breaking even, right? So if you had an IRA with a floor of 0 where you don't ever lose money, if the market goes down 50% when you had 100, you're at 100,000 still. Now, when the market goes up 50, you might be at 150. That's just 1 year. So imagine how much more money you would have by retirement if you had that market protection. So I think when it comes to accounts like those, you can do more than 4% because you're not taking the hit of or the penalties or whatever the market's doing in a traditional retirement plan, right? So I think that's something that people don't think about too. Again, it's not their fault because most jobs don't offer those accounts, right? So until you go out and do your own research to see, hey, does my 401k fit my needs? Does it fit the plans that I want to live out for retirement? If it doesn't, then you might need to make a change. And like Kyle said before, those changes, the earlier you make them, the better. Because if you plan to wait till retirement to make those changes, you might be too late because you might not be able to afford it because it might not give you the retirement income you were planning to live off of.
Absolutely. And that just brings it back to why it's so important to run these retirement income projections and just to figure out where you're at. From there, and then once you figure out where you're at, one of the other, they talked about two things I think that, you can do to help your retirement. One is estimating or deciding when to take Social Security, which that comes up in running the retirement income analysis that we keep talking about, is deciding on when to take it. But just like anything, the more you delay it, think about this. If you were to delay taking your 401k or taking income from any of your assets, you give it more time to grow and build and become more money. Same thing with Social Security. The longer that you delay Social Security, the more that you can take and have in guaranteed income for the rest of your life. Same with your pension as well. It's the same concept. You just give it more time to grow and compound. And then the last thing that she said was to fund an emergency reserve, which is just having an emergency fund. If you're working and maybe before 50, you should probably have 3 to 6 months of emergency expenses. After 50 and getting closer to or even in retirement, it's probably best to have like 6 to 12 months of your expenses in your emergency fund. And that could be something that's, just in a traditional savings account, or maybe look at some type of high yield savings account for some better growth and better returns while that exists. I say while that exists just because it fluctuates with interest rates. When interest rates are high yield savings accounts will have high returns and high interest rates as well. As we start to talk about how interest rates are looking like they're going to start coming down, so will those interest rates in your high yield savings accounts. But with that, Renji, we've been talking for about 25 minutes. Anything else you want to wrap us up with for today? I think this was a good educational video, though.
Yeah, going back to the high yield savings account, something to look at. If you go to local banks, you can get better rates because the big banks don't care about giving you as much of a return. So
they have enough money already.
Exactly. So when it comes to high yield savings account, look for local banks. Because even local banks are FDIC protected. So you go to them and they can give you a higher rates on your high yield savings account. Something else that when you were talking made me think of too, I've also talked to clients that have a lot of money and struggling in retirement because they don't want to access it, because for so long they've lived off of the mindset of, hey, I need to save, I need to save, I need to save. But now they're in retirement, they still have that same mindset. But in retirement is when they need to start accessing that money, right? So that brings me to a question of, hey, what was your goal from starting, putting money aside? If you were doing the right things and putting money aside, what was your goal? Was it to live a more comfortable life in retirement, or was it to pass it down to, your next of kin or your kids or whatever, right? Either way, if you're putting aside time to go on vacation or putting away time to do whatever that you enjoy until retirement, that's another thing you need to think about. You have to have that income to be able to enjoy retirement. You have to have that income to spoil your grandkids, go on vacations, all the things you wanted to do that you put off for retirement. You have to have that money to do that. So another thing to think about is, if you've been doing all the right things, start using that money in retirement. Because I think people have that mindset of saving still, which again is not a bad thing. But if you're struggling in retirement and you planned for it, why not use it? Why not use it to help yourself for retirement and bless others, and all of those things that you wanted to do and that you put off till retirement. Use that money for you. It's not helping you with the financial advisor that you have, just letting it sit there and not using it. It's helping them. It's not helping you. Start using the money that you saved up for yourself for what you meant for it.
It's funny you say that, because I have a couple of clients that came to mind when we were talking about it. And, when they were younger, saving and investing, I'm sure they had dreams of, joining the country club, golfing, traveling, spoiling the grandkids, right? And then they get to this point where they've become so indoctrinated to having to save and invest that, they're almost scared to touch their money.
Yep.
And what's unique about that is, if they don't touch their money, if they don't use that money in retirement, it's just going to transfer to their kids, which are going to be able to then do what? Join the country club, travel, spoil their grandkids, and do the things that they wanted to, that their parents wanted to do, but just never had the opportunity because they become so indoctrinated into saving and investing. And that's just another reason why these personal pension accounts can make so much sense, because you can just take the money that you've already saved up and turn it into guaranteed income. And you don't have to continue to worry about saving and protecting your money, because it's just going to come to you as checks, income checks, that you can spend however you see fit. If you don't need to spend it all, you can just keep saving it. But that just allows more people to have it. There's actually been studies done, and it leads to a happier retirement, because you have guaranteed income and you don't have any financial worries anymore. Not worried about what the market does, not worried about how much income can you take. Are you going to run out of income? It just relieves so many different stressors when it comes to people and their retirement. So with that, thank you guys for tuning in. If you found this video educational and informative, and maybe somebody that's getting close to retirement or starting to become serious with their finances, share this video with them. They may be able to get something out of it to help them make sure that they're on the right track and to have a better and more successful retirement. If you like this video, make sure to show us and give us a like below, and subscribe to our podcast. We do episodes every Tuesday. We go live on TikTok. So if you're not following us on TikTok, go follow us there so you can watch us behind the scenes and watch it live, or just make sure to subscribe to see when we do come out with the official podcasts, which are about once a week now. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.